here, a map of kind of, I don't know where they're from,
Right.
and then order of events, and then here, I haven't scanned it, so I'm not sure if there are like different categories or what, but I think they want people to vote for, I don't know, their
the best
favorite,
colors.
or
Okay.
yeah,
Cool.
whatever the best would mean. I'm not sure.
Thank you.
Thanks, welcome.
You see, the trouble is not with woman, nor with love, nor with longing, but with the identification, with the entanglement. When a man ties his soul to the flickering image of someone else's presence, he forgets the vastness within himself. He begins to orbit her moods, her thoughts, her validation, and he calls it devotion. But in truth, it is a slow forgetting, a forgetting of the stillness he once carried like a secret, a forgetting of his own scent, his own sound, his own soul. Now when a man walks without the gaze of woman pulling him into performance, something miraculous begins to occur. He starts to hear himself again. Not the self that was sculpted by praise or shame, but the self that was always there, long before anyone clapped or criticized. That original self, unedited, untamed. And it's not that women are distractions by nature, no more than the moon is a distraction to the sky. It is rather that most men have not yet met themselves fully, and so, in the absence of knowing, they cling, they grab hold of beauty, of romance, of drama, and they make it their mirror. They need it to tell them who they are. But a man who no longer needs a mirror does not fear solitude. He does not chase, he does not beg, he does not wait to be seen, for he is already luminous in his own eyes. This man, he begins to move differently, not rushed, not restless, not ravenous for the next thrill. He does not need to be entertained. He is entertained by his own breath. He does not need to be affirmed. He affirms himself in silence. And this, you see, is where the power lies. When the inner world becomes louder than the outer noise. When a man is no longer seduced by passing pleasures, he becomes like a mountain, utterly unshakable. There is no longer a performance. He needn't impress, needn't dress himself in someone else's expectations, and so he sheds like the snake that no longer fits the skin of its past. He walks lighter, not because the world has changed, but because he no longer drags it with him. He understands that freedom is not in having more, but in needing less. And that includes the need for romantic validation, the need to be wanted, the need to be chased or chosen. The man who is no longer waiting to be chosen has already crowned himself. And that, dear friend, is why he becomes limitless, not because he rejects woman, but because he no longer seeks himself in her. Not because he avoids love, but because he has become love itself. He is no longer a beggar of affection, but a fountain. And in this fountain there is no thirst, there is only overflow. You see, when there is no woman pulling him from his center, not because she is the enemy, but because he has outgrown the need to orbit, he stands fully in his own gravity, and that gravity is what bends the universe toward him, not by force, not by charm, but by presence. Quiet, unbothered, sacred presence. The world senses it, the animals sense it, the stars notice when such a man enters a room, not because he's loud, not because he's perfect, but because he is free. And freedom, real freedom, it's a rare scent, a wild perfume. And once you wear it, everything false begins to fall away. What begins to happen in the silence is something that cannot be taught. It cannot be forced or faked. It arises like the sun slipping into the sky without asking for applause. When a man no longer seeks distraction, he starts to feel what has always been inside him. And in that stillness, there is an unfolding, a remembering. He begins to realize that his power was never something to be earned. It was never hiding in someone else's smile. It was never locked behind closed doors waiting for permission. It was in him all along, waiting to be noticed, not validated. You see, the mind is like a crowded room, filled with voices, expectations, dreams that were never truly ours. So much of what we call ambition is simply a reaction, a desperate attempt to be seen, to be worthy, to be enough in the eyes of others. But when a man removes himself from the noise of external validation, he starts to hear a different kind of calling. Not the shout of the ego, but the whisper of the soul. And that whisper doesn't demand, it invites. It does not beg for attention. It simply is. Most men never hear it. They drown it in distraction, in women, in noise, in status, in chasing things that sparkle but never satisfy. But the man who sits alone, truly alone, not lonely but undistracted, he begins to feel the contours of a different life. He starts to taste his own depth, a depth that cannot be measured by metrics or liked into existence. It's a frightening thing at first, because when all distractions are stripped away, what's left is raw. You meet yourself naked. No titles, no roles, no applause. Just you. And for many that is too much, so they run back to the comfort of noise, of temporary lovers, of fleeting highs. But the man who stays, he finds gold in the silence. He begins to create not out of lack but out of fullness. He trains not to impress but to sharpen the temple of his own body. He reads not to boast but to feed the quiet fire in his mind. His solitude becomes a sanctuary, not a sentence. And through that solitude he becomes unpredictable, unbound, no longer reacting to the world, but composing with it. There's an energy that emerges in such a man, an energy that doesn't need to announce itself. It's not arrogant, it's not boastful, it doesn't need to compete, because it has nothing to prove, it just is. And people feel it. They may not know why, but they sense something different, a stillness that is unshakable, a clarity that is piercing, a power that comes not from dominance, but from presence. He doesn't chase pleasure. He recognizes that true pleasure is not in the chase, but in the awareness. He can enjoy a moment without clinging to it, without needing it to be more. His detachment is not cold, it's sacred, because he sees through things. He no longer mistakes the wrapping for the gift. A woman may walk into his life and he will see her, truly see her, not as a cure for his emptiness, but as a mirror, a momentary companion in the dance. He won't need her, and therefore he can love her freely, without demand, without manipulation, without losing himself in the process. For he is not walking beside her to be completed. He is already whole. And two wholes can meet without becoming fragment. But he does not seek, he does not roam the world trying to fill the silence. He lives in the silence. He moves with it like a musician plays with silence between the notes. That's where the music is, not in the sound, but in the pause. And this man lives in that pause, calm, deliberate, unmoved. You begin to realize that there is no end to your depth, that what you thought was boredom was simply unfamiliar territory. The inner world is infinite, but most never make the journey inward. They pace the same mental streets over and over, afraid to take the road that leads nowhere. But the road that leads nowhere is the road that leads home. He walks it not out of obligation, not for anyone else, but because he knows. A man who has walked the path of self without flinching is a man who cannot be fooled.
It's caught in the crossfire.